I stood in the boardroom, his words cutting through me like glass. "You're not ready for this. I'm giving the project to someone else." The CEO's voice echoed off the walls while 12 executives watched my humiliation unfold. My face burned hot. 5 years of late nights, missed family dinners, and proving myself over and over again meant nothing in that moment. He didn't even look at me as he handed my project to Bradley, his favorite who'd been here 18 months. Bradley smirked from across the table. The sting went deeper than rejection. It was dismissal, like I didn't exist. I'd built the foundation for this project, researched every detail, created the framework from scratch. Now it belonged to someone else. My hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. But I didn't storm out. I didn't yell or cry or give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I swallowed every word I wanted to scream and kept my face blank. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Walking back to my desk felt like moving through quicksand. Every step reminded me of the weight pressing down on my chest. My colleagues avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their computer screens. They'd witnessed my public takedown and wanted no part of the fallout. I reached my cubicle and sat down slowly, my body operating on autopilot while my mind raced. The humiliation burned, but underneath it grew something stronger. Anger. Pure, focused anger that sharpened my thoughts instead of clouding them. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen without really seeing it. My name is Kira Brooks. I'd clawed my way up from junior analyst to senior strategist through sheer determination. I'd outperformed every metric, exceeded every expectation. Yet somehow, I remained invisible to the people who mattered most. The CEO had his inner circle, and I wasn't in it. Never would be, apparently. My phone buzzed with a message from my best friend Claire asking how the presentation went. I couldn't answer yet. Instead, I pulled up a blank document and started writing down everything I knew about the project they'd just stolen from me. The next morning arrived too quickly. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through scenarios and plans until sunrise. Coffee became my breakfast as I prepared for another day of pretending everything was fine. At my desk, I pulled up the company's project tracker and studied every active initiative. If they thought I'd sulk and fade away, they were wrong. I started with the small stuff, the projects others considered beneath them. A client database reorganization that had been pending for months. A proposal formatting system that nobody wanted to touch. Tedious work that made people's eyes glaze over. But I saw opportunity where others saw boredom. I spent 3 days restructuring the database, working through lunch while Bradley held court in the break room, bragging about his new project. When I presented my finished system to the operations team, their relief was immediate. "This is exactly what we needed," the department head said, actually looking impressed. One small win. But wins were wins, and I needed to collect them like currency. I'd stopped waiting for recognition from the CEO. Instead, I focused on becoming indispensable to everyone else. 3 weeks later, a problem emerged that nobody wanted to touch. The Donovan account, one of our oldest clients, threatened to leave after a billing dispute spiraled out of control. The account manager had quit suddenly, leaving a mess of angry emails and unreconciled charges. I watched executives pass the disaster around like a hot potato during the morning meeting. Nobody wanted their name attached to potential failure. "I'll take it," I said quietly. The room fell silent. The CEO finally looked at me, his expression skeptical. "You sure you can handle this?" Everything in me wanted to snap back with a cutting remark about my qualifications. Instead, I smiled calmly. "I've reviewed the account history. I can have a solution drafted by tomorrow." He waved his hand dismissively. "Fine. But don't make it worse." I spent that evening buried in spreadsheets and old correspondence, finding the pattern others had missed. The billing errors weren't random. They stemmed from a system update 6 months ago that nobody had properly tested. By midnight, I had a solution, a refund structure, and a proposal that would actually strengthen our relationship with Donovan. The next morning, I sent it directly to the client. 2 hours later they accepted. Word spread faster than I expected. The Donovan save became office gossip within days, though the CEO never acknowledged it. In the next staff meeting, he briefly mentioned that the team had resolved the issue, lumping my solo work into collective credit. Bradley caught my eye across the room. His earlier smirk replaced by something harder to read. Uncertainty, maybe. The following week, 2 more people approached me privately with problems they couldn't solve. Small things at first. A presentation that wasn't landing right. A client communication strategy that felt off. I helped them both, asking for nothing in return except that they remembered. This was how real influence built, I realized. Not through titles or corner offices, but through becoming the person others trusted when things went wrong. The CEO could ignore me in meetings, but he couldn't stop people from seeking my help behind closed doors. My phone started buzzing with messages from colleagues. "Got a minute?" became the most common text I received. Each request was an opportunity to prove my value and build alliances the CEO didn't even know existed. By month 2, I'd quietly fixed 7 different crises that should have been disasters. None carried my name officially, but everyone who mattered knew the truth. I was the problem solver they called when things got real. The CEO remained oblivious, too focused on his inner circle to notice the shifting dynamics. Bradley's big project, meanwhile, started showing cracks. I heard whispers in the break room about missed deadlines and confused objectives. The CEO kept defending him publicly, but privately people were losing confidence. I didn't gloat. I just kept working, kept solving problems, kept building my invisible network. Then came the Taylor Industries pitch. A massive potential client worth millions, the kind of account that could define our quarter. The CEO assigned it to his leadership team, with Bradley taking point. They spent 3 weeks developing a presentation that I saw in draft form when someone accidentally included me on an email chain. It was terrible. Unfocused, generic, completely missing what Taylor Industries actually needed. I could have said nothing, watched them fail. But that wasn't the play. Instead, I drafted suggestions and sent them privately to one of the team members I'd helped before. 3 days before the Taylor pitch, panic set in. Their presentation was falling apart, and everyone knew it. The CEO called an emergency meeting that Friday afternoon. His composure finally cracking. "We need fresh ideas. Anyone?" The room stayed silent. People studied their notebooks, suddenly fascinated by blank pages. Bradley looked physically ill. His earlier confidence completely gone. I let the silence stretch for 15 seconds. Then I spoke. "I have some thoughts." The CEO's eyes snapped to me, surprise mixing with suspicion. "Go ahead." I pulled up my laptop and walked through an alternative approach, one that focused on Taylor's actual pain points rather than generic industry talking points. I'd researched their recent quarterly reports, identified their supply chain vulnerabilities, and crafted solutions that addressed real problems. The room listened with an intensity I'd never experienced before. When I finished, the CEO leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "That's actually solid." Bradley's face turned red. "We've already invested weeks in our approach. And it's not working," someone muttered. The CEO made a decision I could see him hating. "Fine. Kira, you'll present the modifications. Bradley, you'll support her." The next 72 hours blurred together. I refined every slide, rehearsed every transition, and prepared for every possible question. Bradley contributed nothing, sulking through our preparation meetings like a scolded child. Monday morning arrived with the weight of expectations I'd never carried before. The Taylor Industries executives filled our main conference room, their expressions professionally neutral. The CEO watched from the corner, arms crossed. I launched into the presentation with steady confidence, walking them through how we'd identified their specific challenges and developed targeted solutions. 20 minutes in, their chief operations officer interrupted. "How did you know about our warehouse inefficiencies? We haven't made that public." Smiled. Your Q2 report mentioned a 3% increase in storage costs despite flat inventory. That pattern suggests distribution center optimization issues. The room's energy shifted. They leaned forward, asking deeper questions, challenging assumptions. I welcomed every challenge, having prepared for exactly this. 45 minutes later, we'd moved beyond presentation mode into genuine strategic discussion. The CEO's expression evolved from skepticism to something I'd never seen directed at me before. Respect. We landed the Taylor account. $7 million over 3 years, our biggest new client in 18 months. The CEO announced it company-wide that afternoon, and for the first time ever, he specifically mentioned my name. Kira's strategic approach made the difference. The words felt hollow after years of invisibility, but I accepted them with a gracious smile. What mattered more were the emails flooding my inbox from colleagues congratulating me, from other departments requesting my input, from people who'd previously looked through me like glass. Power dynamics were shifting, slowly but undeniably. Bradley stopped attending team meetings, calling in sick 3 days in a row. When he returned, his swagger had vanished, replaced by the careful movements of someone walking on thin ice. The CEO still protected his favorites, but cracks were forming in that foundation. 2 weeks later, another crisis emerged. Our Phoenix expansion project, a pet initiative the CEO had championed personally, was hemorrhaging money with nothing to show for it. The quarterly board meeting was approaching, and the numbers looked catastrophic. I watched him grow increasingly frantic in leadership meetings, snapping at people who suggested problems. The Phoenix disaster kept growing worse. Every week brought new cost overruns, new delays, new excuses from the team running it. The CEO had personally selected that team, handpicked from his trusted circle. Admitting their failure meant admitting his judgment was flawed. So he doubled down, throwing more resources at a sinking ship. I stayed quiet, watching the situation deteriorate while documenting everything. The board meeting was 6 weeks away. At 5 weeks, the project manager quit unexpectedly, leaving behind a mess nobody understood. At 4 weeks, the CEO started having closed-door meetings with the CFO that lasted hours. 3 weeks, panic set in. I received an unexpected summons to the CEO's office on a Thursday afternoon. He sat behind his massive desk, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I need someone to look at Phoenix objectively. Tell me if it's salvageable. This was the moment I'd been building toward. When do you need the assessment? Board meetings in 3 weeks. He nodded. I'll need full access. All documents, all financial records, all correspondence. He hesitated, then agreed. For the next week, I lived inside the Phoenix project files. What I found was worse than expected. Not just mismanagement but fundamental strategic flaws from the beginning. The Phoenix problems ran deep. The entire project had been built on faulty market research and wishful thinking. They'd chosen the location based on tax incentives rather than customer demand. They'd structured operations around projected growth that had no basis in reality. I compiled everything into a detailed report, 28 pages of analysis that painted a brutal picture. The CEO had 2 choices: admit failure and cut losses, or continue throwing money away while pretending success was possible. On Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before the board meeting, I requested time on his calendar. His assistant actually looked nervous setting up the appointment. I walked into his office with printed copies of my report and a presentation loaded on my tablet. "How bad is it?" he asked before I could even sit down. "Salvageable, but not in its current form." Relief flickered across his face. I walked him through my findings, each slide building the case methodically. The flawed market analysis, the location problems, the operational inefficiencies. His face grew darker with each revelation. When I reached recommendations, I didn't soften the blow. We need to restructure completely. Different approach, scaled down operations, realistic timelines. He was quiet for a long moment. "This makes my entire leadership team look incompetent." Your leadership team built this based on the strategy they were given, I said carefully. The fundamental assumptions were wrong from the start. The CEO stared at his desk, processing. This wasn't just about Phoenix anymore. This was about his judgment, his decision-making, his leadership. If I present this to the board, they'll question everything. If you don't present it and Phoenix collapses publicly, they'll do worse than question. The truth hung between us like smoke. He could keep protecting his ego and risk complete disaster, or he could admit mistakes before they became catastrophic. What do you need from me? He finally asked. Authority to restructure Phoenix completely. Full operational control. His jaw tightened. This meant giving me power that eclipsed several of his favorites. And if it still fails, then it fails on my watch, not yours. He studied me for what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds. Fine. You have full authority. But I'm presenting this to the board as my decision. I'd expected nothing less. Let him keep his pride. Keep the power. The next morning, he announced the Phoenix restructuring in a leadership meeting. The shock was immediate. Bradley actually protested. We've invested too much to change course now. That's exactly why we need to change course, I replied calmly. Good money after bad only makes the losses bigger. The room split visibly into factions. The CEO's old guard looked betrayed, while others who'd watched Phoenix spiral nodded in agreement. I didn't need everyone's support. I just needed enough momentum to move forward. The Phoenix restructuring consumed my next 2 weeks. I brought in people I trusted, sidelined those who'd proven incompetent, and completely rewrote the operational playbook. We scaled down the facility by 40%, focused on realistic market segments, and built achievable timelines. The old team resisted at every turn. They filed complaints with HR about my management style, called my decisions reckless, and tried to appeal to the CEO over my head. He stood firm mostly because he had no choice. His credibility hung on Phoenix not becoming a complete disaster. By board meeting day, we had a revised proposal that actually made sense. Smaller scope, lower costs, achievable goals. Not the grand vision he'd originally sold, but something that wouldn't sink the company. I stood beside the CEO during his presentation to the board, watching him take credit for the restructuring while carefully positioning it as strategic refinement. The board accepted the revised Phoenix plan without major pushback. Several directors actually praised the course correction and pragmatic approach. The CEO's relief was obvious, though he tried to hide it behind professional confidence. Walking out of the boardroom, he stopped me in the hallway. Good work. 2 words. That was all. But they carried weight because they came from a man who rarely admitted when he needed help. The real impact showed up over the next week. Executives who'd previously dismissed me started requesting my input on their projects. Department heads invited me to planning meetings. The CFO asked me to review budget proposals before they went to the CEO. Bradley, meanwhile, seemed to shrink further into irrelevance. His next project presentation got torn apart in a leadership meeting. His proposals questioned by people who used to automatically agree with him. The CEO didn't defend him like before. The protection had limits, apparently. Then came the Westfield crisis. Our second largest client, threatening to leave after a competitor offered them better terms. The CEO assigned his vice president of sales to handle it, but after 2 weeks of negotiations, Westfield remained unconvinced. I watched from the sidelines as the VP's strategy failed repeatedly. The VP of sales tried everything conventional. Better pricing, enhanced service packages, loyalty incentives. Westfield listened politely and kept moving toward our competitor. With 1 week until their contract decision, the CEO called another emergency meeting. We're losing Westfield. I need solutions, not excuses. The VP looked defensive. They want terms we can't match. Then we need to offer something different, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Such as? The CEO asked. I'd been studying Westfield's business for 2 weeks, preparing for this moment. They don't actually want lower prices. They want supply chain certainty. Their biggest problem isn't cost, it's predictability. The VP frowned. How do you know that? Their industry's dealing with massive disruption right now. 3 of their competitors just folded because they couldn't guarantee delivery schedules. Westfield's worried about the same thing. I pulled up data I'd compiled showing Westfield's market pressures. Our competitors offering cheaper rates, but we can offer something better. Guaranteed delivery windows with penalty clauses if we miss them. The room went quiet as people processed this angle. The VP looked skeptical. That's a huge risk. It's a calculated risk, I countered. Our delivery record is 97%. We can back up the guarantee. The CEO stared at the data. This could work. I spent the next 3 days crafting a proposal that repositioned our entire relationship with Westfield. Not as a vendor competing on price, but as a strategic partner guaranteeing operational certainty. The CEO let me present directly to Westfield's executive team. Their initial skepticism melted as I walked through how our guarantee structure would stabilize their supply chain and give them competitive advantages their rivals couldn't match. Nobody else is offering this, their CEO noted. Because nobody else has our track record to back it up, I replied. They signed a 5-year extension the next day, worth $12 million. More importantly, the terms we created became a template for approaching other clients facing similar uncertainty. The CEO announced the win company-wide, and this time, his praise carried genuine weight. Kira saw what we all missed. This is the kind of strategic thinking we need more of. Bradley didn't attend that meeting. I heard through the office grapevine that he'd been quietly reassigned to a smaller department. His falling star now obvious to everyone. The CEO's protection only extended so far when someone became a liability. My influence continued expanding in ways that felt almost invisible but were completely tangible. People started coming to me before going to the CEO. Project approvals, strategic decisions, resource allocation. My input became the unofficial filter for major initiatives. The CEO noticed but didn't stop it. Maybe he recognized that I was making his job easier, solving problems before they reached his desk. Or maybe he was finally seeing what I'd always been capable of. The quarterly results came out strong. Taylor Industries was performing well, Phoenix was on track with its revised plan, and Westfield's extension had impressed the board. The CEO's position seemed secure again. But behind the scenes, tensions were building. His old inner circle felt threatened by my rising influence. They started having meetings without me, trying to reclaim territory they'd lost. I didn't fight them directly. I just kept solving problems they couldn't handle. Then the Singapore opportunity emerged. A chance to expand into Asian markets. A massive strategic initiative worth potentially hundreds of millions over 10 years. The CEO assembled a team to develop the expansion proposal, and for the first time he put me on it from the start. Not as support staff but as a core strategic lead. The Singapore project became my obsession. I spent weeks researching Asian market dynamics, regulatory environments, and competitive landscapes. While others on the team focused on surface-level analysis, I dug deep into cultural considerations and local partnership opportunities. Bradley was also on the team, a last attempt by the CEO to salvage his former favorite's career. He contributed little, mostly echoing others' ideas or offering generic suggestions. During our third planning meeting, he challenged one of my proposals. That approach seems overly cautious. We should be more aggressive. I'd anticipated this. Aggressive in what way? Bigger initial investment. Faster expansion. Make a real statement. I pulled up market data. 3 competitors tried that exact strategy in the last 2 years. All 3 pulled back after massive losses. The Asian market rewards patience and relationships over aggressive expansion. The room sided with me. Bradley said nothing for the rest of the meeting. The CEO watched these dynamics play out with an expression I couldn't quite read. 2 months into Singapore development, the CEO's health took an unexpected turn. A heart attack, minor but concerning. He'd return to work, doctors said, but needed to reduce stress and delegate more. With the CEO recovering at home, power dynamics shifted dramatically. The board appointed an interim leadership structure, and shockingly, my name appeared on it. I was now part of a 3-person committee overseeing daily operations alongside the CFO and COO. Bradley's entire support system crumbled overnight. Without the CEO there to protect his old favorites, their weaknesses became impossible to hide. 2 of them were reassigned to different departments within a week. Bradley hung on, but barely. The Singapore project accelerated during the CEO's absence. The board wanted expansion plans finalized before year-end, giving us only 6 weeks to complete what should have taken 3 months. I worked 18-hour days, coordinating with international partners, navigating regulatory requirements, and building a proposal that was both ambitious and realistic. Others on the team struggled with the pace, but I thrived. This was what I'd been preparing for. All those years of being overlooked had taught me to work independently, to anticipate problems, to build solutions without needing constant validation. When the CEO returned after 3 weeks, he looked different. Older, more cautious, less certain. His first day back, he called me into his office. "I hear you've been running things." "The committee has been managing daily operations," I corrected. "You've been leading the committee," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. The CFO and CO were capable, but they deferred to me on most strategic decisions, trusting my judgment. "The board's impressed," he continued. "They want you to present the Singapore proposal directly to them." This was unprecedented. Strategic presentations always came from the CEO himself. "What about you?" I asked carefully. "I'll be there, but you'll present. The board wants to hear from the person who built the strategy." He paused. "They're also asking questions about succession planning." The implication hung heavy between us. The board was looking at me as more than just a project lead. They saw me as future leadership material, possibly even his eventual replacement. "I'm not trying to take your position," I said honestly. "I know," he replied. "But that doesn't mean it's not happening." Over the next 2 weeks, I refined the Singapore proposal into something I was genuinely proud of. Not just a business plan, but a comprehensive strategy that addressed market entry, partnership structures, regulatory compliance, and cultural adaptation. The board presentation day arrived with the weight of everything I'd been working toward. The board meeting room felt different from my previous appearances there. This time, I wasn't presenting someone else's work or fixing someone else's mistakes. This was mine from start to finish. The CEO introduced me briefly, then stepped aside. I walked the board through our Singapore strategy, explaining not just what we do but why each decision mattered. Market analysis, partnership frameworks, risk mitigation, financial projections. They asked hard questions. I welcomed them, having prepared for exactly this level of scrutiny. When one director challenged our timeline, I explained why patience would yield better long-term results than aggressive expansion. When another questioned partnership costs, I detailed how local relationships would reduce regulatory friction and operational risks. 90 minutes later, the board chair leaned back in his seat. "This is exceptional work. When can we begin implementation?" The CEO spoke up. "We'll need to finalize funding and partnership agreements. I'd estimate 6 months to launch." "Make it 4, the board chair said. "And Kira should lead the implementation team. Not just present the strategy but lead its execution." The CEO's expression remained neutral, but I saw the recognition in his eyes. The power shift was complete. Singapore implementation consumed the next 4 months. I built a team from scratch, deliberately choosing people based on competence rather than politics. Several were colleagues I'd helped over the past year, people who trusted my judgment and worked without ego. Bradley wasn't on the team. He'd been moved to a minor role in domestic operations, his trajectory from rising star to irrelevant complete. I occasionally saw him in the office, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of squandered opportunity. The CEO and I developed an unexpected working relationship during this period. He consulted me on decisions that once would have been his alone, seeking my input before committing to major initiatives. It wasn't that he'd become weak. He'd become pragmatic, recognizing that my strategic vision complemented his experience. 3 months into Singapore implementation, the board called a special meeting. Unusual timing, no clear agenda. Rumors swirled through the office about restructuring or acquisitions. I prepared for anything. The meeting started with the board chair announcing the CEO's decision to step down. Not immediately, but within 6 months. He wanted to transition while the company was strong, to ensure leadership continuity during our Singapore launch. We've already identified his successor, the board chair continued. My heart pounded. This was it. The moment that rewrote everything. Kira Brooks will become our new CEO, effective 6 months from today. The room erupted in discussion. Some board members nodded approvingly, having clearly been part of this decision already. Others looked surprised but not opposed. The CEO himself showed no emotion, his expression carefully neutral. After the meeting, he asked me to stay behind. "Congratulations," he said when we were alone. "I know this isn't what you expected when you walked in." "It isn't what I expected 2 years ago either," I replied honestly. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him directed at me. "I was wrong about you. That day in the boardroom when I said you weren't ready, I was protecting my own ego, not evaluating your abilities. I know. You proved me wrong. Not by fighting me directly, but by becoming so undeniably competent that ignoring you became impossible." He paused. "That takes more strength than most people have." I accepted his words without gloating. This moment wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about recognition finally matching reality. The next 6 months moved faster than I expected. The CEO and I worked together on transition planning, transferring relationships, and ensuring continuity. My official start date as CEO arrived on a Monday morning in March. I walked into the office that now belonged to me, sat behind the desk that had once been his, and took a moment to absorb the magnitude of what I'd achieved. Not through politics or favoritism, but through sheer, undeniable competence. The previous CEO stayed on as a board advisor, his transition graceful in the end. Bradley left the company entirely, taking a position at a competitor where his reputation hadn't preceded him. My first act as CEO was restructuring the leadership team. I promoted based on merit, bringing in people who'd proven themselves through results rather than relationships. Several were colleagues who'd once been overlooked like me, who understood that titles meant nothing without the capability to back them up. The Singapore launch exceeded projections in its first quarter. Taylor Industries expanded their contract. Westfield became a case study in strategic partnership. The board's confidence in my leadership grew with each success. But the real satisfaction came from smaller moments. A young analyst approaching me nervously with an idea, then leaving my office energized because I'd actually listened. A manager thanking me for creating an environment where competence mattered more than politics. The culture shift happened gradually, but it was real. 2 years into my tenure as CEO, the company had transformed. Revenue up 37%. Market share expanded in 3 new regions. Employee satisfaction scores at all-time highs. The board praised my leadership regularly, pointing to results that spoke louder than any speech could. I still kept that memory from the boardroom though. The day the previous CEO dismissed me publicly, handed my project to someone else, and assumed I'd simply accept my place. Some people used painful memories as fuel for bitterness. I used mine as a reminder of how far determination could take you when you refuse to let others define your limits. The young analyst I'd encouraged 2 years ago now led a major initiative. The manager I'd promoted ran our most profitable division. People I'd invested in were thriving because I'd given them what I'd once lacked. Opportunity matched with trust. My phone buzzed with a message from Claire, my best friend who'd supported me through everything. "Proud of you. Always knew you'd get here. I smiled, thinking about the journey. From invisible to indispensable. From dismissed to decisive. The CEO who'd once told me I wasn't ready had been right about one thing. I wasn't ready then. But not because I lacked capability. Because I needed to learn that real power came from earning trust one decision at a time. From proving worth through actions rather than demanding recognition through words. Now I sat at the top, not because someone handed me the position, but because I'd made them recognize they couldn't succeed without me. That made all the difference. On my terms. In my time. And nothing would ever take that from me again.